what I used to do in the past. Now it's to focus on the mimer in the Torah. Got excited, Michael, when I said that? Good, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. So we're not going to learn the mimer. If you want to learn the mimer, you have to come to the Shabbos morning shir at the Bible Center, where we actually learn the mimer. You're certainly invited to do so. But I'm going to just touch on a point, on Nekuda, as it's called in Hebrew, on Nekuda that the Alter Rebbe speaks about, and more than elaborate on the Alter Rebbe and what he says in the Maimer, it's going to be more about taking one Nekuda and giving it the background in Chassidus. Okay, and some of this, I'm sure you're familiar with already, things I've spoken about in the past, but also, as it says, Ein beis medrash b'lei chidush, even when you review something, there's always something new, right? There's always another perspective, another deeper insight, and thank God for that, because this is what makes Torah learning a perpetual endeavor. Never over. Which is, there's a chiyuv, by the way, for every person, every Jewish person to study Torah. And there is a whole section in Shulchan Aruch called the Hilchos Talmud Torah. Now, when it comes to halachos really is best when it's well defined. Because halacha is not about philosophy, which is probably not well defined, but it's about a guide of how one should conduct their life on a daily basis, right? Mm-hmm. So you need some very, very specific instructions. So there is a Hilchos Talmud Torah. What's interesting is that the Alter Rebbe, his first publication, so we know the Alter Rebbe wrote a Shulchan Aruch, and it encompasses, not everything, but a lot more than what we actually have, because a lot of it was lost in fire before it was printed. But the very first thing that the Alter Rebbe actually published was a pamphlet on the halachos of Talmud Torah, of learning Torah. And when you learn it, you see that there's actually some very specific requirements of what a person has to do. Basically, the requirement is to learn the whole Torah. Okay? But the whole Torah, we're talking about the defined, finite Torah, right? Only so many books. There aren't infinite books. So many books. And according to Hilchos Talmud Torah, you don't have to learn all of those books. But you do have to learn the basics, right? Talmud, Mishnah, Halacha, right? But at the same time, we know the Pasuk says that there's Arucha me Eretz mido, Rechava min hayam. It's infinitely deep and infinitely broad. So therefore, even when you're reviewing things that you've already learned to meet your basic obligation, there's always deeper and more insights. So that's just as a preface to things that I might be saying that will be things that you've perhaps heard before and somewhat familiar. Okay, so the interesting thing in today's Parshas Terumah, is where Hashem gives us the instruction to bake the Mishkan, basically, right? But the most intriguing thing, it seems to me, are the kruvim that were actually built out of the cover on the Aron, right? As that we know from the Pasuk and Rashi's elaborate description of exactly how it was done. It was made from Miksha Echad, it was made from one block, and it was pounded into this form of the two kruvim. So it seems a little bit strange, because we know in the Seres HaDibros itself, we see that Hashem is not very fond of images, right? And yet, in the Aron there was kruvim, and indeed, Rashi also mentions this, that it is forbidden for someone to replicate the kruvim. Okay. At the same time, when you study the Torah Shabbat Peh, you study the Talmud and the Medrash about these kruvim, they're pretty amazing things, because the Chachamim tell us that although they were made from gold, which is an inanimate object, and yet the kruvim would actually move, right? So one of the things is that the wings would be up, and the Ramaz, the famous Ramaz, if you ever heard of the Ramaz, it was a Makubal from the 17th century, the Ramaz. And the Ramaz says that 3 times a day, I think the Chazal tells us that 3 times a day it was up, and the Ramaz connects it to the 3 times of tefillah, of davening. Okay, so 3 times a day the wings were up. Okay, another interesting thing that we find in the Talmud is that the kruvim were facing one another. When the Romans came in, right, destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, they found them facing opposite. Yeah, is there such a thing? Yeah.
Was it the Babylonians?
Yeah, because in the second Beis Hamikdash they didn't have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would not be the Romans. I said the Romans? No,
Yeah,
not the Romans. It would be Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. In any case, so they're very intriguing things, Very intriguing.
Because was it hidden before or not? They go to Babel or not?
Well, where was it hidden?
No.
After the first Beis Hamikdash, the whole Aron was
hidden by Yeshua 30 years before.
Right.
But then in Masech Yoma, there's 2 opinions, right? Was it did the Aron go to Babel or not?
Okay, but in any case, bottom line is in the second Beis Hamikdash there was no Aron.
Right. So the question is, was it the Aron? Was it a replacement copy of the Aron? What was it?
I'm not sure.
Good question.
They didn't have the luchos either, you know what I mean?
Right.
But okay, so here we have this very interesting, intriguing element in the process of building this Mishkan for Hashem. Now, one of the things is that they were images of a bird, but the faces were the faces of people. Okay, 2 children. But it's Adam. It's referred to as Adam. And the term Adam, when you speak about it, Al Pi Kabbalah.
The 2 different kruvim.
Right.
There was a kruvim which Moshe Rabbeinu Betal made.
Right.
There was a kruvim which Shlomo made.
From the Cheshires.
Very tall ones.
I think from the
They were
Cheshires.
tall. The Tefillah was tall.
Whatever.
And those were the ones that were in Zebazah.
In any case, so I'm not an expert on the whole kruvim. Like Rabbi Itkin has more information than that. But what the Alter Rebbe mentions here in Torah is, let's start first as a starting point the term that's used for the faces of the kruvim, and they were human faces. Okay, Adam means a human, but the term Adam has far more connotation than just a human. As a matter of fact, when you go back to the Devuah of Yecheskel, right, and Yecheskel saw this vision, and it was a very anthropomorphic vision, right, of godliness, and he saw all kinds of different chayos upholding the what's it called, the what's called the Merkava, the chariot, and then on the chariot there was the Musa Adam. There was an image of Adam, right? This Adam is called the Adam Ha'elyon, right? Also referred to as the Adam Kadmon, the original Adam. And who's the original Adam? Hashem himself, right? Okay, so this needs to be clarified, because of course we know that Hashem has no image. Now the question arises as soon as you learn Yecheskel, because when you learn Yecheskel, he's seeing a vision and he's seeing Adam Alakisei, and then it's a reference to Hashem, right? So the answer, Judaism is not anthropomorphic, but rather, to just state it very simply, Hashem is able to present himself, okay, in certain images. Now this is almost needed. It's required It's actually required. Why is it required? Because if we start with the foundation that Hashem created people and he wanted them to have a relationship with him, right? So having a relationship with Hashem is going to require that this creature that he created, since he created them to be mortal and finite, right? So in order for them to have a relationship with Hashem, who's infinite without any image, it's not going to work. It just doesn't work. It's just a mathematical impossibility. There's no bridge between the finite and the infinite, plain and simple, just even mathematically speaking. Right, and it's also a point that's made in Tanya, about the nature of the infinite, right? So there has to be, and there is, a process that Hashem actually can present himself, and then that brings us up to the whole discussion of the Tzimtzum that the Arizal speaks about, right? Before the Arizal, I think that the way it was dealt with is just it has to be, but without explanation. So we have before the Arizal, we have, for example, Makubal, who wrote a sefer called Avodas HaKodesh, who simply says that it just has to be, because the nature of the absolute infinite is that it cannot be excluded from the finite. Okay, the way he says it is, if you're going to think of God as being the Bilti Balvul, the absolute, total, complete, infinite, right? It cannot exclude the finite, because then it's not truly infinite. It's something's excluded from it. Okay, that's in the words of the Vedas HaKodesh, but it doesn't explain it. But it comes along the Arizal, right? Really started probably with his teachers, the Ramah, but the Arizal actually developed it into a whole system called the Tzimtzum, right? And he describes the Tzimtzum in great detail with Akav and so on and so forth, right? What? Arizal was a Talmud of the Ramah, right? And we have now a system. Now, not that we therefore understand it that much better, okay? But at least we have a system. Okay? But in any case, whether it's the Arizal or if it's pre the Arizal, one thing is clear. There needs to be some way for there to be a relationship between the finite, us, the mortal finite beings, right? At least in our conscious level, right? Which is pretty much, we know we have a neshama. That neshama indeed is infinite, but we are functioning on a very finite level. We're functioning consciously for the most part. We might be, motivated by things that go beyond our conscious selves. It might be somehow, triggering certain things and motivating certain things. But when the Torah tells us that we are expected to do certain things, right? And it's talking to conscious human beings that they'll then go make conscious decisions to go do A, B, or C, whatever the 630 mitzvahs, right? So the Torah was given to people who function on a finite conscious level. So it's a given that there has to be a bridge, right? The bridge is established by the infinite, by Hashem. But however you want to put it, you can put it in the words of the Vedas HaKodesh, that if that's truly infinite, then you cannot exclude him from that possibility. Or you want to give it a more systematic approach, so use the Tzimtzum of the Arizal, but the bottom line is there is a bridge. Okay? There's a bridge between the infinite and the okay. So when you go back all the way back to Yecheskel, and Yecheskel sees on Adam, he said, okay, fine. Hashem wants to have a relationship, right? He wants to have a relationship with people that through things on a level that they can relate to, right? So he presents himself as a well, whatever. It's a little bit complicated. If you want to have a little bit more understanding,
Concisely.
More understanding between the difference between the Ramak and the Arizal.
Yeah.
So I'm going to refer you to the Chassidus Eretz, On Perik Beis, the Alter Rebbe has the Hagah, right? In that Hagah, and you go in Chassidus Leveres, and I guess you have to go to the back where it elaborates more, it'll give you a very clear understanding of the Rambam and his position, the Maral Miprag and his position, right? And the Ramak and the Arizal.
Excellent.
Okay, so the Maral very much was opposed to the Rambam, right?
Mhm.
Very much, very strongly. The Ramak redeemed the Rambam, so to speak. He brought it back, right? And the Arizal systemized it, or whatever. He put it into some systematic whatever. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's a good place. I mean, it was very helpful to me. I mean, it gave me a lot of clarity in that whole evolution from the Rambam to the Maral, because the Alter Rebbe is clearly addressing something that evolved over generations in this view of whatever. So the Maral, I mean, the Rambam had a certain position. The Maral attack that position. That's part of the evolution. But then the Alter Rebbe says, the Chachmi Kabbalah came back to the Rambam, they defended the Rambam, right? So it's just a very interesting whole evolution over a period of a couple centuries, right? More than a couple, right? Okay. Now, so there you have, that's the other. So now that's one of the features of the Keruvim that it has this, the face is the face of Adam. Okay. Now, there's a Kabbalistic reference to the fact that there were two faces, right? And in Kabbalah, it makes reference to the fact that these two faces, right? How do we know they are different? They're not the same exact face. The reference is the two levels of face. Okay. So why? Because it's called Pneihem. Pnei HaKruvim, the faces of the Kruvim. Okay. So you could say they were identical. But Kabbalah says no. The fact that the Torah, refers to them as Pnei HaKruvim is an indication that there's different levels of Pnei, right? Okay. What are the two levels of Pnei? The two levels of Pnei, just the fact that they're called a panim. What's a panim? How does a panim is a face, right? Now the face is what I'm presenting to you. You see my face, right? When I talk to you, we should be looking at each other eye to eye, and we're connecting with our faces, right? Mm-hmm. Even when we say Shalom Aleichem and we touch our hands, we're not looking at our hands. We're looking face to face. Isn't that interesting, right? We're connecting through our faces, okay? So faces is connection. So since we're talking about connection, so the both levels of face have to do with connection. The first is called the Ape Ravriv. I think it's in right. Rabbi means the big face, and then you have the Ape. If it's Alter Rebbe mentions it here, let me just remember what it was. It was called the Ape Rabbi and the Ape Zutri. Yeah, Ape Rabbi and the Ape Zutri. Zutri means the small face, and Ape Rabbi means the big face. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe explains what are these two faces. They're both the face of Hashem. One face is the face of Hashem, where Hashem presents himself in the world of Atzilus. But then we have the face of Hashem, the way Hashem presents himself into the worlds of Bria, from Bria and down. Okay? Now, Atzilus, again, we're not talking about the essence of Hashem, we're not talking about what's called the Atzvus Umos. We're talking about Hashem, who is presenting himself in this whole imagery of the 10 spheres and so on and so forth. The problem, however, is that in the world of Atzilus, it's not yet a relatable world to human beings, because it's still a world of Ein Sof. It's still a godly world. In other words, that unification that takes place. I mean, the Kabbalah speaks about a unification of Hashem and that which he brought about to be. What's that a reference to? That's a reference to the world of Atzilus. Worlds in general, but starting with the world of Atzilus. What does it say about the world of Atzilus in Kabbalah? the life force of Atzilus is one with the essence of Hashem, and the actual Garmoihi, what he caused and he brought about to be in Atzilus, is also one with Hashem, which is the bigger chiddush, by the way. The fact that Iyu v'chayohi chad is a chiddush, and it's actually dealt with very extensively by the Mekubalim, even before the Ramak, about the relationship of the Ar and from where the Ar emanates, right? But there's definitely a closer connection between what we refer to as Ar, right, and the source of the Ar. So they're different, but they're really not really different because there's nothing in the Ar that's not in the Mar. The Mar is right; it doesn't change anything. But then you have what's called the Kalim. The Kalim already, you see something that is not recognizable in the essence. So, for example, when a light is being shined through a colored glass, you're seeing red. You don't see that red in the light. It only has to pass through the Garmohi. So now in the Garmohi, we're seeing some kind of a state of existence that seems to be outside of the existence of Hashem. And the big chiddush, the big news is no. The He and also what results from the Kalim is also one with Hashem, right? So it's hard to wrap your head around it, but the basic, but the way the Sakodesh deals with it, he says, but it has to be, right? And the Real says it could be. You know why it could be? Because there's the tzimtzum involved, right? The tzimtzum. Again, it's not like a simple topic, but it at least puts it into some kind of a system. There's before tzimtzum, there's after tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is that God is able to reduce himself into a state that we could relate to. Okay, so that begins in the world of Atzilus. But in the world of Atzilus, it's still called the Apiravivi. It's the big face. It's the face of God. It's the big face of God. So it's still infinite, right? It still has an infinite element to it, which makes it difficult for us to relate to godliness in the Atzilus level on a regular basis, right? Where do we begin at least our relationship with godliness? When we find godliness, how godliness he presents himself in the Bria, in creation. Once he extends himself into creation, right? Now already, whoa, that's part of our world. And now we can start a process of examining this world that Hashem is creating, and we can come to a very, very deep appreciation and understanding of Hashem because of his involvement in this world. How did this come to be? Hashem made it be. And then you start learning Tanya, let's say the second Chelik, Ashicha Damuna, and all of a sudden things that you took for granted that they exist, all of a sudden the more you learn Yichud Damuna of the Alter Rebbe, the less you take things for granted, and the more you see that these are just reflections of Hashem, right? And they couldn't exist without Hashem. And they have no independence whatsoever. But that's all a process. Okay? But that process begins with the Apizutri. The Apizutri, is that what I'm saying? The Apizutri, the small face. The way Hashem extends himself, he presents himself in a smaller face through the creation in the world of Bia. These are the two faces that are represented in the two different groups. Okay. Now, what is the ultimate purpose here? Is that the Kruvim come together, right? The Apiravivi is the excitement of the world of Exilus that we cannot really appreciate, right? Unless we're living in special times. And special times means like in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. And the times of the Beis Hamikdash, things were different, right? We were able to relate to things that today are elusive, right? We can delve into it, and we have very limited, understanding of what it is we're even delving into. The times of the Beis Hamikdash was different. This is it's one of my lectures is about the difference between Beis Hamikdash Harishon and Beis Hamikdash Hasheni. Beis Hamikdash Harishon Nevuah was brought, right? Beis Hamikdash Hasheni Nistalka Nevuah, right? When you think about that, we're talking about a major. This is what's the word? It's not just a little change. The whole paradigm of reality has changed, right? Because what nevuah means is that part of our reality includes also the spiritual reality. Post the Churban, in the second Beis Hamikdash, spirituality is very elusive. It's still kind of part of our reality, but not real, right? Real is sleeping, eating, and maybe enjoying a blat gemara, right? But true reality, spirituality, it's definitely part of of our life, right? But it's somewhat elusive. We don't have a direct connection to it. That's why we're not privy to nevuah, right? That's the new reality, the new paradigm of reality of the second Beis Hamikdash, which explains a lot of things. It explains why all of the Gzeros of the Chachamim, most of them were established by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah in the times of the second Beis Hamikdash. Why were they necessary when they weren't necessary before? Because when people have a much clearer, sense of deeper reality, they don't need all these Gzeros, they don't need all these offenses to keep them away from doing things. Once you remove that, so it comes to the second Beis Hamikdash and things are different, right? And okay, we have to struggle in order to maintain our, being in line with spirituality. We have to struggle when it should be like natural, but it's not natural anymore because we don't have that perception. Our antennas have been removed in the times after the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash. So the Alter Rebbe, actually the Maimer begins with a pasuk from Shir Hashirim, which we unfortunately in Lubavitch have been denied the beauty of Shir Hashirim. It's one of my pet peeves about the Chabad movement.
We know a lot of psukim.
We know all the psukim all from the Maimarim, but I am so envious of the people who say the whole Shir Hashirim word for word out loud every Friday night before Kabbalah Shabbos. I spent many a Shabbos with these people, and from the children, from a very young age, they know the whole Shir Hashirim word for word. They recite the whole Shir Hashirim every Friday night. I loved it, and I was envious. I was very envious that I wasn't brought up in that culture. I think everything else about Lubavitch, I was perfectly happy. I'm not what's it called. I'm happy where I am. I'm happy where I was brought up. Okay, but I have to say I'm envious of that one thing, that this is not part of our culture. I have heard rumor is that the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, did say Shir Hashirim. You heard that? So I heard. But it's not common practice in.
Was it because he was in a non-Chabad show?
Maybe.
Because like you said,
No. The non-Chabad also doesn't say. Ashkenaz doesn't say Shir Hashirim. It's the Sfardim that say Shir Hashirim.
No?
Yeah, the Sfardim. It's the Sfardim. That's what I'm saying. It's a Sfardi thing. Saying Shir Hashirim is Sfardi. So every Sfardi, and not necessarily even like Dati or Frum, because Sfardim are very traditional and they go to shul more than the Ashkenazim. Secular, right? And the way the shul is that the davening or most of the davening is all out loud, word for word. I saw this when I was in Seattle. Seattle is one of those few cities that actually has a strong Sephardi community. Something that almost didn't exist in America. I mean, like it was, but it's very interesting. All the places, the three big shuls in Seattle, Washington, one Ashkenazi and two beautiful, buildings of both Sephardi. Why two? Because they were from different regions. One was from Rhodes, and the other was from Turkey or whatever. I don't know what. But there were two Sephardi communities. So we used to go there once a month. We used to go do Mesiva Shabbos there, right? So daven in one of the Sephardi shuls, and was a whole different culture, a whole different culture. And the shir and the davening out loud is part of that culture. So Sephardi kids know davening, Ashkenazi kids, but and the Sephardi kids know everyone, right? It's something to be envious of, in my humble opinion. And especially when it comes to Shir Hashir, okay? Shir Hashirim, especially, I appreciate Shir Hashirim better than you guys, because I have all these memorim. There's a whole chelik of the Alter Rebbe's memorim just on Shir Hashirim, right? We're the ones who really understand. Basi Lagami, so Shir Hashirim, Ani Ladaidi, V'daidi Lei, Shir Hashirim. All the Shir Hashirim, and we have such a broad, very colorful and exciting connection with all of this, right? Okay. So the pasuk actually of the Maimer that talks about the Kruvim, right, that we started talking about, it actually starts with a pasuk from Shir Hashirim. What's the pasuk? Mi tencha ka'achli. If only you will be like my brother. It's the conversation. Okay, I see Michael is a little bit familiar with Shir Hashirim, Baruch Hashem. Yeah, he didn't allow his involvement with Slobavitch to deny him the exposure to Shir Hashirim. So it's like towards the end, the Peiches, I think, right? If only if you would give that, I could be like your brother, right? So the Alter Rebbe tells us, what does it mean being a brother of with Hashem? So it says in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, we were like brothers with Hashem. That was a relationship. We were brothers, very close brothers, right? And then how do we know, for example, that during the Beis Hamikdash, he brings us support to this notion that in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, we were brothers to Hashem, because the pasuk that we're all familiar with, L'man achai v're'oi, right? For the sake of achai, my brother, v're'oi, and my beloved, right? Adabra noshalach, L'man achai v're'oi, and then you say at the end of the pasuk, you say, L'man beis Hashem elikeinu. For the sake of being my brother, and for the sake of Beis Elokeinu, so they go together. When is Hashem like our brother? When there's Beis Elokeinu. When we have the house of Hashem, which is a reference to the first Beis Hamikdash, because the second Beis Hamikdash wasn't quite complete. Okay, there were many things missing. So these are brothers, right? In Shir Hashirim. It says the Kruvim said, so you have these two faces, right? When are they like brothers? In the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, right? But then we have the Ramaz that says that they would raise their wings towards each other, right? 3 times a day. And that would be in the times of Tefillah, right? What is it about Tefillah? Tefillah is the time that we, even in the time when we're not just naturally brothers to Hashem, what do we do in the process of Tefillah? We start with the Apizutri. We start with the small face. We try to connect to Hashem as much as we can by delving into Hashem's involvement in this world. But then, and especially davening is the time that's the most appropriate for this, we then kind of like ascend to a place where we become transcendent of that world. That's ultimately what davening time is supposed to be. When you kind of transcend the reality around you. I mean, these are the halachas of tefillah, are basically designed to help a person become oblivious to his surroundings, which in a deeper sense means he becomes oblivious to reality as we experience it, on a moment-to-moment. So that's the pshat, the kruvim. The kruvim are the two faces. The two faces are where Hashem is in his own world, and it's the second face, the smaller face, where Hashem is involved in our world, right? When are we brothers? When are we brothers? Like the sign of Israel, where the two faces come together, right? Mm-hmm. When the Beis Hamikdash is not, we still have a process, a daily process, where we could at least to some degree rise above this new reality of, post-Korban, right? And become a brother with Hashem once again, okay? So now there's another point here that I want to make. It's based on the Maimer, but it's my own thoughts, okay? This relationship is a two-way relationship. right? It's a two-way relationship. Now, it's almost like a given that it's a two-way relationship because the whole purpose of the tzimtzum, I mean, it's not, well, let me put it this way. Maybe it's not so obvious, but the whole purpose of the tzimtzum, the way we usually describe it, is so that we can have a relationship to Hashem. But there's another side to it. Hashem wants to have a relationship with us, right? And he knows that if he doesn't do something, right, like a tzimtzum, right, he ain't ever going to get that relationship. He created a monster that he cannot, he can't be a part of. Right? So the whole purpose of this tzimtzum, to create this, so to speak, the small face, is not just so the small face could then somehow rise to the point where it can actually look at, face to face with the big face, right? It's about Hashem, the big face, the Rabbi, also getting a pleasure in that relationship. That's why it says that we are mefarnes l'Kadosh Baruch Hu. We provide him his substance. What? Entertainment, whatever you want to call it. Okay, and maybe putting a little too lightly. Yeah.
Take where his pen.
But so I thought I was thinking, because I went to I went to get an oil change this morning, and I was waiting for my car to get its oil change, and I was thinking about this stuff. I was actually thinking about something else, because when you mentioned the Ramaz, right? Ramaz was learned in yeshiva, I think in Italy, right? And he actually later became the Rav. He was born in Amsterdam. Well, not really sure where he was born, but he grew up in Amsterdam. But then he went to yeshiva in Italy.
Columbus uses charts.
Oh, the Ramaz, yeah, it could be. But the Ramaz, yeah, and the Ramaz had a secular education as well. Now, just to put this in a little bit of context, at that very same yeshiva was another Talmud. Now, with exactly the same time the Ramaz, some want to say they were, but was Baruch Spinoza. Okay. So the Ramaz and Baruch Spinoza both went to the same yeshiva. But then the Ramaz realized, and that's where he also was exposed to Kabbalah, also in Italy, because there were a lot of Mekubalim there. But he somehow felt that there was something lacking in his learning of Gemara, of Talmud, and Halacha. And he attributed it to the fact that he had a secular education when he was in what's it called. So he went to Poland. In Poland, I can promise you, the Adarm in Poland, there was no secular education. So if you want to escape the secular world, right? Those in the 17th century, you headed off to Poland.
The wife actually in Poland where he's actually in Albert Einstein, and so the Jews were the Albert Einsteins, and they had their own things that they learned.
But yeah, right. So and a very interesting thing I read was that Ramaz did something very similar to what the Gemara tells us about Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera grew up in Bavel, but then he moved to Eretz Yisrael. He went on Aliyah. And he wanted to go join the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael. And he realized that his mode of study in Bavel is going to interfere with the study, the level of study as it was being studied in Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbi Zera fasted. The Gemara says he fasted Me'il Taniso. He fasted 100 fasts before he went to Eretz Yisrael to prepare himself. And the Gemara says, what was he going to accomplish with the fast? To forget Talmud Bavli. Now, it doesn't mean to forget Chas v'Shalom. I think the Rebbe made this point also. To forget what you don't want to forget. To transition, to forget, to leave behind the old mode and prepare himself for the new mode. So he had to kind of like go through like a cleansing or whatever, right? In order to prepare himself. So the Ramaz fasted not 100, he fasted 40 Tanesim before he went to Poland to learn Torah. And he had studied Latin, he was proficient in Latin and so on and so forth, and he wanted to like put it behind him and move on to a whole new level when he went to learn in Poland. This was Deren. I guess Baruch Spinoza didn't have quite that same sentiment as Deren. Yeah,
Fast to 40 fast to.
to be bachapper for Baruch Spinoza.
No, fast to 40 fast to forget what he learned.
Okay, it's gotta learn in Shiva, yeah, whatever. I'm afraid that wasn't the case. I have this little feeling that it actually was. It started because in Italy there was no such thing as not having a secular education, right? So it was incorporated like we have today, right? It was incorporated into the yeshiva, right? So they did. They in the yeshiva they studied that. If they went somewhere else for those courses or whatever, I don't know, but it was common. It was common in those days in Italy. It was common that if all of the great, even the Rabban, you know what I mean? The Rabban was fully educated, right? But they were able to do it, and it should not affect them. But I have to say that, I'm going to conclude just from Baruch Spinoza that it unfortunately didn't always turn out, like the Ramban and the Ramaz and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
There were many that actually got caught up and drifted away. And the Baruch is just one of the well-known. I'm not at least I'm far from an expert in philosophy in general, and certainly not in the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza, right? But the little bit that I read about it, I feel that he got the raw end of it. He was somewhat misunderstood. Now, I'm not going to say that he didn't go crooked. He definitely went crooked somewhere, but I think he was blamed for going far more crooked than he actually went. Okay. Now the problem was that the poor guy got it from both sides, because in Amsterdam, I guess he also, I don't know, maybe he was from Amsterdam and studied in in Italy, but then went back to Amsterdam. He was actually put into Cheder, right? Now it's interesting. They say that he was an atheist, right?
Actually,
He wasn't an atheist.
No.
He just had a very interesting. It was, the pantheism is actually attributed to him, right? Pantheism. So the Yidden were telling him, like now, if you read in English a biography, they'll say that he was accused of being an atheist, but that's not true. They didn't even accuse him of being an atheist. They accused him of being an apikoros. An apikoros doesn't mean an atheist, okay? Because an apikoros is if a person denies that Hashem gave us the Torah, right? He's called an apikoros, but he's not denying whether Hashem exists or not. And there's nothing in the writing of Spinoza where he rejects the notion of a God. On the other side, some of his contemporaries were telling him that he was, the term that's used, and I forget which philosopher said this, was that he was God intoxicated.
Yeah.
So they didn't like what he was doing because they thought that he was whatever that means, God intoxicated, and it was affecting his objective approach to whatever to existentialism or whatever, right? So whatever. I just I meant that Amaz. It's interesting that he was a contemporary of Baruch Spinoza.
Yeah.
But he fasted 40 fasts and went to Poland, and Baruch Spinoza became a.
They were at the same time?
It seems so. They were studied. They for sure studied in the same yeshiva under the same. I forget who it was, but one of the chachamim of the time. But they both studied secular studies, and the Ramaz said, "Okay, I need to take this to a whole new level." This direction, and Baruch Spinoza went the other direction. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Jewish community in Amsterdam, Jewish community in the Netherlands felt it had to do something about Spinoza because the whole idea actually was we mentioned convinced actually the Netherlands were not Catholic.
Right.
Now all of a sudden they're going to say, "Oh, you're a bunch of atheists."
Yeah.
We were repudiating it.
Yeah. So one of the things, and this is really the reason why I even brought it up, not so much the connection with the Ramaz, is because one of the things you commonly hear from both scientists and philosophers is this rejection of a personal conscious God, which is so confusing to me. I don't understand. You know what I mean? I said, wait, do you believe there's in the cosmos? Okay, the reality is big in the cosmos. Right? Do you also agree, and I sure hope you do, because otherwise we wouldn't be having a conversation. Do you believe that there exists within the cosmos a thing called consciousness, right? Sitting right across the table from me, right?
Yeah.
So, like, why would you exclude God if the cosmos can have consciousness, right? As proven by these things walking around, right? Doing things that are for sure being generated by conscious decision, including even animals to some degree, right? There's consciousness there. And I talk about the panpsychism that says that there's consciousness in everything, right? Because but there's definitely it's something that exists in this world. Right? If it's isolated or not, doesn't matter. It's part of the cosmos. It's part of the reality in which we live. There's this thing called consciousness, right? To walk around you all the time.
I mean, at the very least, I know that I'm conscious, maybe I'm making up.
Yeah. Yeah, can you include me, please? We don't want it to be total solipsism, you know? Yeah, that's called solipsism, right? Well, yeah, Descartes. So anyway, so whatever, that's the thing that like sometimes very brilliant people, to me, it seems like they say very stupid things. It's like, okay, I'm not asking you to believe in God, but if you're going to say, well, maybe I believe in God, but certainly not a personal conscious God, I mean, that's such a cop-out, you know what I'm saying? It's like not an intellectual statement, it's a cop-out statement. It's ridiculous. No, that it doesn't fit into science. Does it fit into the cosmos? Which supposedly you're examining and studying, whatever. It's one of my things that I just like. I wish I could sometimes, look at a guy that's so much smarter than me, and sometimes like, God, you sound like a true idiot. It's like, I do it all the time in my mind. I tell these people they're idiots. Anyway, so here we have. Yeah, we're talking about a conscious God. Now, how he got to that state, there's a tzimtzum involved or whatever, okay? But that tzimtzum was not just for our benefit, it was also for his benefit, right? So this relationship is a two-way relationship. That's why it's called what does it mean when you say that we're like brothers, and times of Midrash, it was natural, we were in a state of brothers. Why does Shira use ach? What's the point? By using ach, what are you saying? Equals. In what sense equals? That this is a mutual relationship. It's you benefit, I benefit. It's now thinking, how do you explain that Hashem is benefiting? So I went back to one of the mashal that's used for the idea of tzimtzum. So one of the things that in Chassidus and the Rabbi Rashab, uses this extensively. And he literally takes it apart. He dissects this mashal. What's the mashal? Of a Rav and a Talmud. The Rav has to teach the student, right? Now, because it's his job, right, to teach the student, he has to somehow find a way for the student to connect to some of these deep ideas that he's trying to teach him, right? Now, the student, if he just presents it to him on his level, the student is lost. Okay. So in order for him to get a paycheck, he's got to show, some results, right? So he has to be mitzamtzem. He has to take his seichel and he has to reduce it. He's got to reduce it. And he reduces it to a level where the Talmud could actually connect. Okay. But ultimately, he says, okay, now I got you to connect. Now let's start building it back and building back, right? Until, as the Talmud tells us, that after 40 years, you finally realize what your teacher was telling you, right? So you're building him back. So the point of his tzimtzum is not to hold something back from the Talmud. It was in order to help the Talmud connect and then grow to the point where he could actually even then and get even smarter than the teacher. Okay. Now, if the teacher's just doing it to get to get a paycheck, so then he doesn't necessarily have any interest in this tzimtzum, right? Other than showing the results. Look, I created doctors, lawyers, whatever, right? And be considered a good teacher and whatever, and get a raise and all those wonderful things. But I'm thinking that no, the process is much deeper than that, because on the one hand, it's kind of like annoying for the teacher to have to do this symptom. There's an annoying element to it because it's distracting him from his world. It's taking him away from his world. I'd rather be talking to my contemporaries and asking them questions, things that I can't ask you, right? So I have to kind of sacrifice my world for the benefit of the student's world, right? Okay, so that's kind of like a negative for the Rav, right? But when you think about it, when the teacher sees the student's eyes light up because he masterfully, he presented it in a way that he got the kid's eyes to light up, right? And then as they continue, he sees how the kids are really connecting and they get it right. You tell me that there isn't a deep satisfaction and pleasure in the Rav?
Sure there is.
Of course there is. So it's not just about getting a paycheck. He actually enjoys seeing how these young students are because of his intervention, his help or whatever, they're able to, to now become the next Rosh Hashiva, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying that's the thing about these two faces. The Api Ravravi, when the Api Ravravi then goes and mitzamtzim himself to the Api Zutri, so that we could have a relationship with him, it's about the faces coming together, becoming brothers again, right? That relationship of becoming brothers again, right, is mutually advantageous to both Hashem and to Bnei Yisrael. It's a mutual advantage over here, this whole symptom. And that's why the term is actually used that Yisrael Mefarnes and Lavim Sheb'Shamayim. We give Hashem his salary. We pay his salary. Okay? Why are we paying his salary? Because we are giving him the satisfaction of knowing that the tzimtzum was well worth it, right? So that we could rise to meet him on his level. Anyway, so that's today's share. I'm glad I went back to the Torah. I like this stuff. And sorry for getting sidetracked with Baruch Spinoza, but he was a Yid. And I think that if he would be living in today's times, he would be doing, he would be running a Chabad house and on some high